If you've ever been laid off and are looking for your next move and figuring out what to do next, this episode is for you. So, Jan, I know you were in a similar situation recently. What was going through your mind when you first heard the news?
Wow, it was a bit of an overwhelming emotional, I would say, yeah, overload, to be honest. It came very unexpected. I think these five stages of grief that everyone has heard of are unfortunately very true. And I think it was important for me to understand which stage of that grief I'm in. I was pretty shocked at first. Obviously, I think that lasted for about 3, 4 days. I simply couldn't really understand how this has happened. How did I find myself in this position? And I've obviously been seeing online what's happening with Google, Amazon, Facebook, and the overall tech sector. But yeah, I think shock initially was the best word to describe it.
Yeah, it's like the stages of death. You have what disbelief, shock, and then eventually acceptance. And once you, I guess, you eventually accepted your current state, you actually said, okay, let me do something about it. Let me create a company. Is that correct?
That's correct. I'm very fortunate to be based in Thailand. My daughter is going to school here, and I just looked at the options I have. So I could try to move to Singapore, which is obviously your home turf right now and the home of a lot of great companies and regional organizations, but it's not easy, especially the time is tough. I'm not inside Bangkok, so I could go back to Bangkok, but finding a good job is like winning the lottery. And then option three is if I don't want to disturb my little bubble of my daughter, try to find out what I can do myself. I never really thought about myself as being an entrepreneur. I never thought I had the guts to do it, but it seemed the best option. And then I realized, okay, let's go all in, create the company, create the logo, and try to find my way.
Awesome. So once you created the logo, you created the company, what is one thing that maybe shocked you about the life of an entrepreneur that you didn't anticipate going into it?
I think there's new shocks and new learnings every single day. I think what's important is you try to embrace and enjoy the journey. I think the most positive thing that has happened to me is one that a lot of good people came forward and that the network is more than just random LinkedIn connections. There are a lot of good people out there and some bad eggs, but some good people mostly. And secondly is the kind of energy. It's different. I'm never really shied away from work. I had very good jobs in the past, but also pretty tough roles. What I think was different now is that everything I do for myself, and there's no one really pushing me. I don't have to report to anyone, and the motivation is still pretty high. So I think that's probably the biggest change. And yeah, getting your hands very dirty. I had to create a logo, had to create a company, had to deal with admin work, IT work, creating a website. Yeah, very much solopreneurship at this stage.
Tell me about it. I'm 5 years in now this month, and my hands are filthy. Now they're filthy with the blood, sweat, tears. So I could definitely relate to you. So it sounds like you, once again, you set up the logo, the website, everything like that. How did you go about getting your first client? Because that's always the first and the most difficult challenge you're going to face as an entrepreneur.
I think I got fairly lucky. So I have in Thailand a German guy. He's father of a kid that is very close to my daughter, and he's been asking me for the last 4 years if I could help him out, and I never had the time. And he doesn't have much marketing background, and he said, "Okay, I help you to become your first client. I'll help to pave that way, and you're gonna help me to start the marketing basically function from scratch for his company." Then the second one came through connections, and now I'm talking to two more companies that were very organically coming. I would say I haven't done any hard sell. I try at the moment to really work on the funnel, talk to as many people as I can, and see what converts. So I don't think there's a magic recipe for now. It's talking to a lot of people and having a certain reputation definitely does help.
And can I ask roughly what percentage are German? Because the reason we spoke about this last time is that when you come from a particular area or culture or background, sometimes it's a bit easier to reconnect with people, or at least build a relationship with people from that background. So I'm curious, being a German in Asia, how has that impacted the way you network or build relationships with folks?
So funny enough, the first two clients are indeed German, and I know these gentlemen for almost 5 years. So there's a longer relationship, and they know what I have been doing. The third one, which I hopefully can sign, fingers crossed, this week, is a white goods company, and it's an international company with a lady in charge of all their efforts on the marketing side, who I know also for 3 years. So there's no fresh new connections out there right now. I need to try to harvest my current existing network. I think my challenge is that I never really banged onto being German or this German network. I haven't really gone to many events in the past, but now it's time to, yeah, go out there again and maybe use this to my advantage.
Yes, maybe some early Oktoberfest celebrations to draw up some business might be in order.
Probably,
But
probably.
yeah. So I'm curious because one of the most difficult aspects of being a solo entrepreneur, we talked about this previously, is just managing your own yourself, really managing your mindset, managing the pressure and things that go into it. So how do you deal with all these newfound or different challenges and you're having to deal with?
Also, very, very good question. There's good days, there's bad days. I think what's important is not to lose yourself when you, yeah, get punched down. I think it's important to look forward. Also, and I think it's a joke I've made before, is I haven't really been facing rejection for a long time. I have been with my wife for over 10 years. I'm not used to being told no. And I think this is probably one of the learnings that everyone who will find him or herself into this situation is just to deal with this and take it in a professional way. It's not easy, but trying to detach myself from, yeah, being told no, that it's not personal, I think is super important and critical. And I believe a lot of people haven't really, yeah, faced that, including myself, in the past. The second thing that I found very important is not to lose traction. I have had, unfortunately, a lot of colleagues who were let go over the last couple of months, and I could see some of them really struggling. They took some rest, digested the news, and then to really get going again after being in this ditch was really difficult. I could see a lot of my, yeah, dear colleagues struggling with that. I think one maybe recipe that allows me to be where I am right now is that I didn't really took the foot off the gas and just to try to keep the momentum. I think that's probably the key, keeping the momentum every day and celebrating those little baby steps every single day. Yeah.
Yeah, I know folks who've been on both sides, those who keep the pedal on the gas nonstop and those who take, hey, I'm going to take this opportunity to take a 2 or 3 month vacation around Southeast Asia or Europe. And I don't think there's any wrong or right approach, but I'm with you. I think for me, I always feel the pressure. Also depends on your responsibilities. I think the people who are doing those trips maybe don't have kids. So it might be a little bit easier if you don't have that additional financial responsibility to deal with. But definitely, I think if you have kids, it's really tough to slow down. And I think this is where managing your mental health comes into play, like you said, and also dealing with rejection, because that's something I think a lot of people when they start being an entrepreneur are unaccustomed to. Now, fortunately for me, I've been dealing with rejection most of my life. So I feel like I should have thicker skin by now. But it is one of those things that, as an entrepreneur, you're going to be constantly beat up. And I feel every day, not every day, but some days you look like at the end of the Rocky movie where your eyes over here and your cheeks over there. And it's brutal. And I guess the question is, like you said, how do you power through that? Because without having that mindset, I know people who say, oh, I'm going to think about starting a business and they realize, look, this is not for me. Someone mentioned very recently that being an entrepreneur is not for the faint at heart and it's tough. So I'm curious, like, how do you keep yourself going through, like you said, the rejections after rejections? At least in my case, you probably not so much, but how you deal
I
with
mean,
that?
I still get a lot of rejections, or like the leads get cold, you get ghosted, you don't hear much back from people. I think they just try to counter it by this funnel. Like in for every person that doesn't talk to me now, and they may come back again, or for every person that tells me no now, I talk to three more people. In the end, I think it becomes a little bit of a numbers game, and also trying to refine what it exactly is you want to help. So I try to not be very specific with everything I have to offer. So my first two clients want two totally different things. The third one wants something totally different again. And I just try to be very open minded. I also offered quite a bit of, yeah, support and consulting to people in my field that doesn't immediately get me remunerated. And I believe it's building up some karma points that is super important to, yeah, do good now and try to cash in a little bit later.
Yeah, it is one of those things where you feel like you kind of have to pay it forward. I still do quite a lot of consulting for people who have lost their job and are in similar situations. And I think it's another thing to remind yourself, because this is where a lot of people struggle when it talks about building relationships, is they say, hey, look, I help this person out, or I give them advice, or I give them an introduction. When am I going to get the favor return for me? Or when am I going to get paid off the back of this? And I think it's a very dangerous mentality to have, because when you think like that, you're looking at someone from a transactional point of view. What can I get out of them immediately versus how can I help this person, and how could they potentially help me down the road? Fine, fair enough. But when you expect something very quickly in return, I think a lot of people really set themselves up for failure. What do you think about that?
I fully agree. I fully agree. I can understand why people are doing it, and I think it's this smell of desperation that is also not helping you. I think you need to have that kind of confidence, and you need to have a confidence in your abilities, but also a little bit of the time frame. Obviously, right now, I have to admit I'm in a very lucky position to be in Thailand, where the cost of living nowhere near as crazy, I would call it, like Singapore, where there's obviously a lot more pressure. But I think it's important because the world is so small. It is actually really interesting, and for everyone who's listening to this, to think about it, how many connections they have made in the past, and that come from a very small circle, or where one conversation with a person you might have randomly met at an event has led to something. The industry is really, really tiny. So I think it's important you just do good, talk to people, offer your help, offer your services, and eventually something will come back to you. And if it doesn't, then it's still fine. It helps you again to build that momentum and this kind of positivity. So I'm trying to tell myself that on a regular basis, and so far it's been serving me quite well.
I'm still trying to remember myself that 5 years later. It sounds like you're in a much healthier mental state than I was when I started the company, which I think is great, because you really need that to continue for the long haul. It's not, like I said, not easy for many folks. What is one thing for folks who are in a similar situation? What's one piece of advice you'd give them now that you have set up the company, you have clients? Any advice you'd give them?
I think going back to the very first 1 2 weeks when it immediately happened, I think it's important to stay away from your vices. I think it's very easy to start slipping, drinking too much, sleeping in, eating, and then trying not to talk to people. I think it's very easy to do that. And yes, you can do it, but try to avoid it as much as possible. I think that's a very slippery slope. And I tried to force myself very hard not to go down that route. The second part is to be grateful for what you still have. And there's a lot of people who are in a worse position. I'm not asking you to compare yourself, but this is an advice I got from one of my colleagues, and he was right. So I'm look at every day I wake up and I'm try to be grateful for it. And the last thing that I have neglected for many years was my health. I haven't gone running for years. I haven't been doing a lot of sports for years. And the mental health and physical health, in my point of view now, seeing it because I've been last 3 months a lot more active physically, has helped me tremendously. I start every day with a little exercise, with a little run. I go more often to the gym and I feel so much better. I can highly recommend it. It also helps with the stress, to counter it, to counter that negativity with some physical exercise. And again, I haven't done that really before, but this is probably my one advice. If you want to feel better and you want to feel less stress, you need to vent. And that physical kind of exercise has done wonders for me and for other people I can see.
I think it's a very good point. Is pros and cons. Is pros, you have more time. You also have more pressure, but you also have more time on your hands. So you have more freedom to place it versus when if you're in a full-time job, not like you can say, hey boss, I'm going to go to the gym for an hour or two. What? You're fired. So I think it definitely is an advantage in what you're doing. But yeah, I really appreciate you coming on the podcast and sharing your story and sharing your journey. We're all rooting for you.
Thank you.
Anyone want to connect with Jan, please do. He's available on LinkedIn. We can see the logo on the shirt there. So look him up on his website as well, too. There you go. You got to spot it. So yeah, I really appreciate you coming to the show, Jan.
You're very welcome. Again, anyone who wants some advice, even I'm allowed to be able to give that. My journey is still very fresh. Please do reach out. I'm happy to help, and take care of your physical health, take care of your mental health. Talk to as many people as possible. There, you might be just one or two conversations away from your next job or your next, opportunity. Let's call it that way.
Yes. Remember, you're not alone. Like I said, a lot of folks are going through a similar situation. So I appreciate you sharing yours. And if you're going through a similar situation, guys, as Jan mentioned, reach out to your friends, your colleagues, sorry, ex-colleagues, whoever it is, to build that support system, because it's really tough through this time, but having that will help you out tremendously. So hopefully this is helpful for you. If it is, feel free to share it with anyone who might find it helpful as well. Otherwise, we'll see you on the next episode.